Howdy doody, buckaroonies, and welcome back to another episode of Morning Coffee with Cameron. In case you haven't heard, the bird is in fact the word, and in this video we're going to be exploring the new UVI Falcon 2.5 update. This brings in a couple of new modeled effects, some new modulation options, an expanded factory library, a whole bunch of interesting new sequencer stuff, and a handful of other quality of life updates and enhancements that make Falcon even better than it was before. Falcon 2.5 is available right now, and it's a free update for existing Falcon owners, so that's pretty awesome. If you haven't updated, you could pause this video now and go do that to follow along as we go exploring here today. Otherwise, if you want to check out Falcon, you can learn more with the link down in the description below. Today's video is also sponsored by my friends over at UVI, so big thank you to them for helping to support the channel and making this video possible. With that, let's put on our Falcon ear caps, or one of those sick glove things, whatever they're called, and dive right in. To get this party started here today, I wanted to first show this patch, which makes use of the new VCF20 dual filter. Falcon 2.5 brings in two new filters, VCF20 dual here, as well as the regular VCF20. This is just a single filter rather than dual filters, but you can morph between high pass and low pass modes. In case it's not obvious enough, this is modeled after the sound of the Korg MS-20. If you don't know about the sound of the MS-20, you could probably just pause this and go listen to some examples, but the long and short of it being that it goes from a pretty standard filter to absolutely annihilating nuclear meltdown, screechy, distorted resonance, and it sounds awesome. And UVI have done a fantastic job implementing the sound of that into this new filter here. So let's give this patch a play, and then we'll talk about a couple of notes about how I made it. This patch has a lot of stuff going on, but I think what's cool about Falcon is how modular it is in nature. So one of the things I brought in here is a couple of LFOs, and I've got these tied to velocity so I can get some really dynamic and expressive patches from something relatively simple, in this case just a handful of saw waves and a filter. One of the other things I've introduced here though is the smooth random modulator, which is new in Falcon 2.5. As the name would imply, it gives you smooth random modulation. But what I did is actually just tie this to pitch here. So I went into the pitch and added the smooth random and did this by about 10 to 15 cents. Now this applies to every single voice. So that way, if let's just disable this filter here. If I just give this a play, you'll hear that there's this really nice analog drift to everything. I'm just gonna play a quick chord. Now, if we disable that and give it another play, bit more static. I've also added a couple extra things here that you can do for some quick tricks to make things feel a little bit more interesting. On the start phase, I actually just went in here and added a random modulation. So under other, went to random. Then I've got just a little bit of movement on the hard sync here with the mod wheel. That way I can just bring that in and get some enhanced kind of fun screechy stuff. Other than that, once I enable the filter, I've tied an envelope to the low pass here, and one of my favorite things to do with envelopes is make them react with velocity, so I added a sub-modulation of velocity to that. That way, if I play soft, we just get kind of a gentle opening of the filter while the sample and hold moves around that resonant high pass. Added some delay to that high pass sample and hold. But if I really press into it here, we can get a much more aggressive sweep. The resonance of this filter sounds awesome as well. Let's just kind of crank this up and increase the trim here. Drop the the voltage. So we can get some really wild stuff, or we could tame it a bit and trim it even further. This way we're not going totally insane with it. There's also key tracking as well, so we could key track these filters to make them move up and down the keys a bit more. So really, really excellent sounding filter. One of the other things I brought in this patch that's also new in 2.5 is the TS Overdrive. This is modeled after the Tube Screamer with some added mods. So disabling that, we get more of a, I guess, standard filter sweepy patch, but the VCF20 is gonna add a little bit of crunch. Sounds a lot more tame though. Bringing in the TS Overdrive, a lot of really lovely color and tone, and just kind of makes the sound feel more alive, I guess. Saturation is always fun stuff, but this is in particular a really nice addition to Falcon. I think it adds a lot more flavor than just a simple soft clipper or something like that. Going back to the filter here, just without the overdrive for the sake of doing a bit more of a insane filter sweepy thing, let's bring this up and hear that without any additional overdrive. More of a high note. Really nailed that just screamy, screechy character to it. Before we move on to the sequencers, let's take a closer look at a couple of these modulators. Smooth Random does feature a random start. This way we can get totally random, smooth, random modulation. So that's really useful just for adding drift and kind of flow and flavor to things. But the other new modulator to know about is the new multi-LFO here. This is a combination of different LFO shapes. We can increase them to bring them in here. So we can have a triangle wave, we could have a sine, and we can bend the waveform in different ways. We could bring in a square, we can change the pulse width of it, we can increase the amount of saw, sample and hold. I think you get the idea. We can also smooth this out to make some smoother stuff. We can have it be bipolar, and we can normalize it or not normalize it. There's also controls for frequency, phase, and rise time. All of this can be independent and polyphonic, so you can make some pretty wild LFO shapes with this, and it's something you should explore. Moving on, let's talk about these new sequencers because they are super, super cool, and there's a whole bunch of them. So here I've just got a simple sine wave, and that's what we're gonna be using to demonstrate this. First up, we have the Cartesian Sequencer here. This is something that is deceptively simple. It's a regular sequencer arranged in these blocks. So it goes left to right and then cycles down and so on and so on. You can see we can offset this in semitones. So if I just hold a note and play this right now, moves forward, we can change the speed in X here. So let's slow that down to eighth notes. We can also quantize this to a scale, so we get standard scale selections here. But where this gets interesting is we can change the mode. So we could do backwards, or we can go into split double trigger, which allows us to control the X and Y speed independently. So I'm gonna change this to half note triplets with 8 notes on X. So now if we watch, this is gonna cycle through the same sequence in a bit more of an interesting way. So we can get some cool kind of polyrhythm stuff going on here. Let's up this to maybe dotted eighths. We can change the size of the grid. We can also change the gate length. We can clear it here. We can randomize here, which generates a new random pattern. And we can auto randomize. So we could have this randomize every bar. and just generate new sequences forever and ever. Moving on, one of my favorite new sequencers is Euclidian Keys here. This is a really interesting take on a standard Euclidian sequencer. If you don't know about Euclidean rhythms, basically the long and short of it being we have a number of notes arranged over time and we distribute them as evenly as possible. So instead of being like a gate and cycling around kind of like an arpeggio or something if we hold down a chord, this is actually different Euclidean rhythms for each note, and that's really, really fun to explore. I'm gonna set this down to eighth notes, and then we're just gonna go down here and randomize everything. So now I'm gonna hold down a C. Let's bring in the E flat, and the G to make our C minor again. Let's extend this up and down a bit. So just by holding down that chord, let's just play all the notes at once. Some really cool overlapping things start to occur. Let's drop this down a little further, maybe to quarter notes, just so we can hear things a little bit more clearly. And this can be a really awesome way to generate some underlying rhythms and grooves underneath your tracks or as part of a layered Falcon patch. Over here as well, there is control over velocity, so every note can have an independent velocity and accent velocity control, so that's kind of cool, and you can make some very complex things with this very, very quickly, or just by randomizing stuff and seeing what you get. Another really fun new tool is the Polyphonic Sequencer. So this is a note sequencer that's polyphonic. So if I just hold down a C, and if I hold down a C and a G, now what this does is it allows us to apply offsets. So I'm just gonna do something like that. I'm gonna hold down a C. Yikes, now let's hold down a C and a G. Yikes, but we could quantize this quickly. Let's quantize to minor pentatonic because it's nice and safe and fun. Hooray! That's just the C. Let's hold the C and the G. Now we can also lock this to the scale here. So this is gonna be in C, so I could play just a kind of funky chord of random notes. And it quantizes everything perfectly into C minor pentatonic. We also get controls for velocity, so let's do that. Let's pan these ding-dangaroonies out a little bit. We've got poly aftertouch, which is cool. Repeat, I'm just gonna add some repeats here and there, maybe something like that. And the note length, so boop, 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 boop. All right, and let's hold down a C and a G again. Cool. Now, what's really fun with this is going in and enabling random start and or one-shot mode. This allows you to randomly start somewhere in this and it creates new sequences forever and ever. So that was pressing C. So we can hear it starting at a random place every time. Now if I play C and G again, this is really fun to experiment with, and you can also enable one-shot mode. So it'll run through just one time and then stop. Probability ARP is a whole mess of fun, so this is an arpeggiator with probability involved with some cool harmonization tools as well. So let's play a C minor. Cool, pretty standard stuff. Let's up the octave, and now it's gonna go across one octave. Cool, let's drop the chance of that happening though. Let's add a chance of ratcheting. Let's add a chance of skipping, maybe something kind of like this, and a chance of an accent, maybe something about like that. Cool. Let's add the harmonize function here. So this is going to be auto. So it's automatically going to pick little harmonies and stuff that fit with whatever I'm playing. We can go into advanced here as well and set this to a specific scale. So let's do minor, and we can just play some stuff in minor. So it's just automatically generating new harmonies based on whatever I'm feeding it. And that is a really cool take on a classic arpeggiator. Rain Sequencer is another pretty unique sequencer that is sort of similar to Euclidian Keys in that every note gets its own sequencer lane, if that makes sense. So right now, if I give this a play, all three of these are running at the same rate, but we've got different velocities going on for each. So I'm gonna randomize the rate of everything here a couple times. Don't really care. Okay, now let's play that same C major. Looks like these got the same. There we go. Cool, let's randomize velocity. And randomize the panning. Instead of fixed though, let's go to random. And I think we'll randomize this one as well. Let's expand that chord up a little bit. And we can randomize everything over here if needed. So this is going to randomize the velocity grid. I don't know why, but suddenly that really reminds me of Christmas. Moving on. Here we have Warp Sequencer, which is a speed warping sequencer tool. I don't know what to call it. I don't honestly know that I've seen too much else out there like it. It's kind of like tying an LFO into the clock of a modular system and letting that adjust stuff. So let's go in and just draw a ramp down, kind of like that maybe, and just click smooth to smooth that out a little bit. I'm gonna hold down a C. So we hear it's faster and then it gets down slower. Let's adjust the hit rate. Maybe increase it. Let's add some mutation. So it's just jumping across octaves. We can also play a chord. So let's slow this whole thing way, way, way down and just draw something really kind of crazy, redonkulous. Sure, and smooth that out a bit so it's not so crazy, and hold down that chord again. This one's pretty interesting. I find it really useful for pads and stuff to add like shimmery, plucky stuff up on top, and especially if you do something like going in here and randomizing maybe the panning of the voices. So let's add modulation, other random. Now we'll get some really interesting glittery stuff. Let's just mutate that even more and maybe add a quick little touch of reverb on top. There we go. And maybe something sort of about like this. Now, if we give that a play, we get this really shimmery, glittery, sparkly thing that can sit on top of something else. Last up here, we've got the wave sequencer. So if I play a chord, you'll kind of see what happens. Back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. So we can randomize the speed of everything, and we can even unsync them. So we've got stuff that's not synced to a tempo value at all. So that's actually pretty cool. I really like this one. I think it sounds amazing with just lots of different things to create some kind of textural layers on top of drones and stuff. Randomize the panning. We can get and do random mode there as well. Poly aftertouch and depth adjustments. So we could do stuff with poly aftertouch to make this even more interesting, but let's give this a play. And those are the new sequencers. To demonstrate these sequencers a bit more in action, I've cooked up a handful of patches here. This is an analog sequency type thing where I've got the rain sequencer running on one layer and then a nice pad moving underneath with the smooth random. Here I've got another patch. This one is using the probability ARP feeding into the gate mod script. This is allowing me to have a random chance of notes skipping. This third layer as well has another probability ARP running at a different rate. Then I've got a skip going on that as well. The second layer has nothing going on. It's just a pad layer to sit underneath all this. So let's give this a play. Here's a bit more of an interesting patch. This is the Cartesian Sequencer. This is running into a range limiter. This way it's not playing just a whole bunch of random stuff. That feeds into a scale, which is then reprocessing things and quantizing them. And finally, through a gate mod, this is again adding a chance of notes skipping. This is pretty cool and makes for some pretty interesting stuff by just holding down a single note. So I'm just gonna play a, I don't know, let's play an A. Because this is getting processed down here further, this is then being quantized into this scale out of C. Let's maybe change a couple notes here. We could increase the range. Now if we bring in some more notes. Nothing really changes because it's just running off this sequencer, but you get the idea. We can just hold down a note and generate a whole bunch of ideas forever and ever. Now, on the note of generating cool new ideas with these sequencers, one of my biggest wish list items with Falcon was that I could take some of this stuff and give it to other things in the DAWg by way of routing the MIDI, and UVI added a small little update allowing you to kind of do that. So if we go in here, we can actually grab the MIDI record under utilities. So we could put that at the bottom of everything here, drag that on down. And now we've got a MIDI record module. So we could just hold this down and hit record. Cool. We could stop that, and then we can just grab and drag that into the DAW. I really hope to see a proper MIDI out from Falcon in the future. I think with these sequencers that would be insanely powerful, and it would be really fun to run this into some of my hardware or other plugins. But in the meantime, that's a pretty nice update that finally lets you at least get some of the interesting ideas you can make with Falcon and its various tools and drag it into your DAW to use with other stuff. One last patch I made that I think is kind of fun here is utilizing the Polyphonic Sequencer, but what I've done is just kind of unsync everything about this patch, so it's kind of all over the place with the gate mod script here by adding a whole bunch of delay, increasing the time and increasing the randomization, adding a good amount of skip, and just using random start on everything. This takes pretty much any simple input, quantizes it to a scale, and makes these really cool kind of pseudo granular textures. By running this into a couple effects like some tape delays, Chorus, the TS Overdrive, and the new VCF20 filter, all fed into judicious amounts of good old Spark Verb, we get this. And that is a tour of the new Falcon 2.5 update. Like pretty much everything UVI touches, this kicks a whole lot of ass, and it's a free update for Falcon owners, so if you haven't updated, you can go download that now and start exploring all of these cool new features. And I suppose that wraps everything up. So big thank you again to UVI for sponsoring today's video, and of course, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, I hope you learned something, and of course, I hope this inspires you to get out there and make something awesome.